All right, our next speaker is Steve Young, and he's going to talk about one of the things that was mentioned earlier on by Enrico Nardone, the plants that have come back at the sites where the Nissequogue River Dam blew out. And Steve, by the way, is a retired the New York State botanist not too long ago, and he's also helped me out with my spotted turtle study. So I spent a lot of time with him in the field last year. It was a lot of fun doing a floral survey. All right, here you go, Steve. All right. Thank you for coming. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So.
Yep. Forward and back. Yeah. Okay.
And this will tell you how much time you have.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Nice to see everybody here and be back on Long Island. I spent a lot of time on Long Island looking at natural areas, and for some reason I never made it to Blydenburgh Park. And you know, it's really an amazing and beautiful park if you ever have the chance to get there. So here's a picture of it drained, the pond that had drained, and we'll talk about the plants that came up there. So Blydenburgh Park and Stump Pond, which is sometimes it's called New Mill Pond, also you see that on maps. And it's, if you look at the top of the slide there is Smithtown Bay, and you go to the lowest point of the bay and then go straight south, and you'll come to Blydenburgh Park there near Hop Hog and just north of 454. Now, back in August 18th and 19th of 2024, there was a huge rainstorm and the dam broke and the pond drained. And you can see over on the right there is what it looked like that next March. So here is got my pointer here. This is the southern lobe here at the Nissequogue River coming north. This is an aerial photo from Seatuck. And this is the eastern lobe with the eastern branch of the Nissequogue River coming in from the east here. And you can see there's not many plants, if at all. There might be some on the shoreline there. And you see this is just muck, very deep muck. Now, if you remember too, back in 2019, in June, we had a similar thing that happened at West Brook Pond at Connetquot State Park. So the dam broke there, and that pond also drained, and that's about a 10-acre pond. And you can see on the upper right there what it looked like that same year in September, and we went in there and did a survey of the plants of that pond. And then 4 years later, in 2023, you can see how it has succeeded. A lot higher plants, there's shrubs coming in, trees coming in. And I wanted to look at this pond and see how it compared also with Stump Pond. Here is West Brook Pond, and if you look at where Enrico on the left there is standing, and this is Eric Lamont, he's president of the Long Island Botanical Society, and we did this plant survey there, and the floor of the pond there is mostly sand, and it's very hard, and you can walk almost anywhere on there. We were walking all around that pond. But if you look at Blydenburgh Park and Stump Pond, it's a totally different situation. It's a very deep muck that is there, and there's really no way you can walk on it, or you'll sink up to your chest, as you see in the upper left, what happened to a guy who went after his dog on the muck, and he sank up to his chest, and they had to rescue him. But for some reason, the deer, which weigh as much as humans sometimes, they don't seem to have a problem, and they get around, and on the right there, you can see deer trails going through there. So it sounds like a physics problem to me, why they can stand there and we can't. They got 4, right? So the pond was created in 1798, so over 200 years old. It's had a much longer time to accumulate that silt, probably, and also the Nissequogue River is a bigger river than West Brook, and probably bringing in a lot more silt. And here's a look at the pond in June. And I did 2 surveys. CTUC had me do 2 surveys there, one in July, early July, and then in late August. And I had a few eagle-eyed volunteers along with me too in a couple days to help me out. So here is the pond, and up at the top is the North Shore, and right there you can see there's some houses. That's the historical village where the mill was, and that's probably the best place to go in and park and look at the pond. And these are all the survey areas that I did, and I gave them a name and surveyed it during those 2 surveys. So you have the North Shore. The northwest lobe over here is sort of a little swampy area with a stream in it that doesn't have a name as far as I know. And then the eastern lobe is a long lobe over here where the eastern branch of the Nissequogue comes in. And then this is the longest part of it, which is the south lobe, which goes down to a swamp down here, which is not really walkable. It's a red maple swamp, and it does have some still Atlantic white cedar in there, which is rare in New York. And also some of these areas, like on the west side of the south lobe, I couldn't walk there either because it was just too deep. But most of the shoreline was sandy and walkable, and there's a trail that goes all the way around the pond, which is really nice, and so it's pretty accessible around the whole thing. Now here is an aerial from June, and you can see plants starting to come back. There's algae there too, but up on the upper part of the slide there, you can see some little wildflowers coming back, and still a lot of water. And this is what it looks like in July. You can see a lot more plants coming back in July, starting to get hot, and the plants are really liking that. But there are still some open, muddy areas over here, which haven't filled in yet with plants. And then there's a lot of open areas between a lot of these plants too. And here it is in July at ground level. So there's a lot of grasses and sedges and wildflowers coming up. And you can see out in the out here, all these little shrubs, small shrubs are shrubs of purple loosestrife coming in. So this is the south lobe down here, there's a peninsula that comes out, and then this is the northwest lobe up here. This is from the North Shore. And here it is in August, and you can see a lot more, again, filling in as time goes on. And here's the stream that comes in from the northwest lobe. Here's the main river and the eastern lobe over here. And the place that was open before now is filled in with plants. And this mud here is starting to dry out a little bit more. So you could actually walk out farther. We saw some people actually walk all the way out to the river and fish in the river. And then this is the ground level shot in August also. And it shows these plants are getting a lot bigger. So this is nodding beggar's ticks, are huge patches of this wildflower, nodding beggar's ticks. A lot of sedges and grasses in here. And then in the background, you can see sort of that purple mist of purple loosestrife. So the results of the survey, we had 120 taxa, species, subspecies, and varieties in all areas, and that includes that northwest lobe sort of swampy area. It includes the drained area and also the shrub border. So there were 120 species there. And there were 121 at West Brook, so a very similar amount of species in both those drained ponds. Between the two ponds and the blue letters there were 51 taxa that were in common between the two. And the ones that were in common, there were 26 that were non-native, 26%. And the most species that were in common between those two were the smartweeds. So there were 6 species of smartweed that both ponds had. Now, the plant taxa of the areas in Stump Pond we had the open shoreline and muck. With the drained area, there were 84 taxa, and 16 of those were widespread, dominant and widespread, so they covered a lot of area, and then there were a lot of species that were smaller in extent. And there were, at West Brook, there were more in actually the drained area. The shrub border, we had 26 taxa. 2 were widespread and dominant. There was sweet pepper bush and high bush blueberry. And then we had, in that shrub area, 1 state rare plant. There's a picture of it down there, the broad-flowered common dodder, which is a little plant. I don't know if you know dodder or not. It's that yellow spaghetti-looking vine that you see on plants late in the summer. And then in West Brook, we had 4 state rare taxa, which were actually out in the drained area. So more there. And then comparing the invasive species too, we had 11 invasive taxa at Stump Pond and 7 at West Brook. Of course, you're on Long Island, you have a lot of invasive species, and so there's bound to be a fair amount here too. So let's go over some of those plants that were dominant in the drained area. Now, the wildflowers had the highest percentage, 44%. And over on the upper left is cursed buttercup. And that one is called cursed because you would curse at it if you got the sap on your skin because it burns your skin. So that's why it's called that. Short-stalked false pimpernel, big patches of that on the muck. American burnweed is a tall aster family plant, which is scattered all over. And then water purslane in the upper right, again, big patches of this very low plant on the muck. On the left, below, nodding beggar's ticks, again, huge patches of this. This is the most I've ever seen anywhere in New York. And the biggest plant I've ever seen also. So I guess it's pretty fertile there, and they have a yellow flower. And then these dotted, in the middle, dotted and stout smartweed. So the dotted smartweed is this one, a taller, bush-looking one, and then the low, more robust, stout smartweed here. Those are very common all over. And then I included here on the lower right is Marchantia, which is a liverwort. And this is, these little palm tree-looking spore bodies are very characteristic of that. And there would probably millions of those along the shoreline, just below the sand. Graminoids, which are grasses, sedges, and rushes, comprise 36%, and we had path rush, common soft rush, and Canada rush were the most common rushes there. Again, fairly big patches of those. And then in the lower left, red-rooted flat sedge, which is a, used to be on the, I think it's, used to be on the rare list, not anymore, but it has, again, the tallest I've ever seen in New York, really robust, huge patches. In the middle, rice cut grass, which has serrate leaves that'll cut your clothing and your skin. And on the right, there's a carex species of sedge, which I couldn't identify because, big patches of it, but I couldn't identify it because it never had any flowers or fruits. I have to go back again. And then shrubs and trees were 8%, and the 2 most common things were purple loosestrife on the left there, and that, you remember those sort of isolated shrubs around. Well, there were also big patches of it too. Here's like a big wall of purple loosestrife in the eastern lobe. But I talked to Bernd Blasi at Cornell, who has dealt with biological control of this, and he thinks that the biological control will probably catch up to these eventually. And in the upper right is gray willow, which a lot of people don't know about. This is a Eurasian species of willow, which has this, where the blue arrow is, it has a gray bark, smooth gray bark, and next to it, it's right next to a black willow, you can see, with sort of a platy, darker bark and longer leaves. Gray willow has small oval leaves. Looks a lot like bed willow. And down below that, you can see huge patches of seedlings of the gray willow coming up in the muck. That was in the south lobe. So here are the invasive species that are present, and these are before and after the dam break. So on the left, in the shrub border. The most are in the shrub border. Those were there before the dam broke, and then also after the dam broke. It didn't affect the shrub border. And you can see these are very common invasive species throughout Long Island. And in the middle, when it was a pond, before the dam broke, there was these aquatic animals, carp, sunfish, mitten crab, and sea lamprey. These are all documented in IMAP invasives. And then below that, variable leaf milfoil and hydrilla were two invasive plants in the pond, aquatic plants, which are probably still there, and they may come back if the pond comes back. And then when the pond drained, there were the gray willow, which I just showed you, the Phragmites, which is around the edges of the pond, sort of on the sandy areas and into the muck. There's some pretty big patches of Phragmites, mainly in the south lobe, but it's not too bad. And purple loosestrife, and then yellow iris too, some really huge specimens of yellow iris. Now, all these observations that we did were put into iNaturalist. So if you want to go to iNaturalist and see what we saw, you can see where we saw some of the examples that I mentioned. And iNaturalist also puts in observations of anybody who goes to Stump Pond and puts in an observation. Now, the pond, if it is let go, it will probably start to succeed into shrubs and then eventually trees. And I mean, maybe with some help, it could succeed into a red maple hardwood swamp, like you see there on the left, or the Atlantic white cedar swamp there on the right. All those stumps, those hundreds of stumps, were Atlantic white cedar. It was probably a fairly large Atlantic white cedar swamp there in the 1700s before they cut all the trees and made it a pond. And, or it could be a mosaic of both of those. But the red maple swamp that is there, this is actually a picture of the Nissequogue River in that red maple swamp on the southern part of the park. And it's a really nice swamp, and they have a boardwalk that goes through the whole swamp. So if you ever get a chance to go over there and walk around the whole pond, it is really nice. So I'd like to say thank you to CTUC for having me do the survey, Darcy McDowell from North Shore Land Alliance, Alexa Hoffman from Parks, and Matt Kalin, who's a photographer. We're all my eagle-eyed help for that. So thanks again, and thanks for coming. Any questions before that goes down the river? Yes.
So with respect to the Atlantic white cedar, is there any evidence that it might come back on its own, or are there any prescriptions for possibly helping to bring it back there?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's ever restored an Atlantic white cedar swamp, but I would imagine like if you collected seed and grew them in a nursery and planted them out, that might work.
But there are no adult...
There are adult trees there in the south part of the park.
Oh, there are?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, they're really tiny seeds, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
This amazing plant pot, where are the seeds coming from? Is it seed drained from the environment, or is it in the mud? Has it been there for?
Yeah, like that, West Pond, the dam broke in June, and by September it was full of plants. So those things didn't come in because a lot of those plants hadn't gone to seed yet naturally. So it was a lot of seed bank plants. So those plants have been there maybe up to 100 years. I mean, there's probably a lot of seed bank plants there, but seeds are always raining in all the time. And I think probably a lot of those seeds were fairly new, but there could have been old seed plants that were there with fruit in old seed banks.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah, they can last a long time.
All right, I think we need to
Okay.
catch up. Thank you, Steve.